Alrighty, so it's been a little while since we've done one of these short stories, and I've made quite a few since then, so I figured let's go ahead and sit down and read another one of these short stories here that I wrote myself. So here is one I like to simply call Mask. "Take off that mask," the cold voice requested. A cold voice is usually used in expression, but this voice was truly cold. Every time it spoke, things around it got colder. The victim made sure they kept their mask secured to their face, knowing full well what would happen if they took it off. They thought about what brought them here. It was no ordinary walk in the woods the previous morning. The sun seemed dimmer somehow. The air felt like walking through a powerful gust of wind that was also somehow stationary. "Let me see your eyes," the voice requested. The victim shook their head and lowered themselves. Escaping would not be this easy. Their morning walk was interrupted by a dark figure which spoke first, asking to let it approach. Our fool of a victim agreed and set about these events. Upon a glance, things changed. They could barely move, and the voice spoke again, requesting to grab their hand. A fool agreed, and their hand became something else. It changed rapidly, like rotting food, slowly turning black and moldy. Eventually, the hand was as disgusting and as terrifying as the voice's hands. The voice made a new request, and they accepted again, this time not a fool, but a victim. This voice had a hold of them now. Only the willpower of a god could escape it. The voice requested they step forward, and our victim did so, slowly turning their feet and calves black and moldy and disgusting like their hands. A glimmer of hope sparked in the victim's mind, and they began running. Their home wasn't far. Their way out of this was just within reach. "Look at me," the voice requested. Our victim had made it home and kept their eyes away from the voice. They made their way to the craft room and began work. The victim created a blindfold to tie around themselves so they would never look at the voice. And it worked briefly. But their will was not that of a god's. The voice asked again, and the victim found themselves attempting to remove the blindfold. To combat it, they slammed their face into a table. The pain freed them for a few moments, long enough to give them a new idea to escape this voice. "Remove the blindfold," the voice requested. It was as cold as ever, yet somehow convincing. With their mighty willpower, the victim refused and proceeded with their plan. They began sewing the blindfold to their face. There were screams of pain, which they muffled with a cloth. Now gagged, now fused with the blindfold, and now calmer, the victim became a fool once more. "Speak to me," the voice had requested. "No!" the victim yelped, and thus their throat became sore. Their mouth leaked black liquid, and spots of black began to fade over their neck and lips. Another moment of panic, our victim began to sew the gag to their mouth, so they would never be fooled into speaking again. The voice would not leave. It requested again and again for them to remove the blindfold. To make it even more difficult to remove the blindfold, the victim used their senses to find a child's party mask and sew it to them as well. "Take off the mask," the voice requested, bringing us to where we started. A shake of the head, a cry under the blindfold, and a wish to wake up all came in vain. The voice continued, "Take off the mask so I can see your face. Let me gaze upon your eyes. Let me make you beautiful." The victim began to succumb to the voice. Their willpower was not enough, and so they found themselves almost uncontrollably scratching at the mask. Their previous actions to sew the mask to their face had paid off and proved near impossible to remove in their current state. "Don't you want to be beautiful like me?" the voice offered. "Take off the mask," it hissed. The room was nearing below freezing, but our victim shook more in fear than in the cold. This made them unaware of just how cold it was getting. "Remove your stitches," the voice requested. Shortly after, the victim found themselves with a pair of scissors, and they were cutting at the skin around the stitches near their chin. Willpower kicked in again as they went to cut the stitches out near their ear. They forced themselves to cut off their ear. Falling to the floor, the victim cried out in a muffled pain. The pain distracted themselves long enough to summon more willpower to cut off the other ear. Their new plan had taken effect. They couldn't hear anything and were left crying and shaking on the floor. "Last you heard me, I entered your mind. Become like me. Become beautiful. Remove your stitches. Rip off your mask," the voice persisted. The victim covered the place their ears used to be, but to no avail. This voice was no longer around them, but inside them. "Cover, cower, hide, be all these things, then become me," the voice requested. There is no happy ending to our story. The victim remains just that, a victim to the voice which slowly drove them to follow its every action. With every action completed, the victim became more like the voice. Nothing of beauty unless evil is what you see in it. For this victim became a disgusting black creature of shadows and mold and pure evil. Once converted to this disgusting evil, they were to repeat the cycle, find victims to make them become like them. So, if you ever hear a voice ask you if it can approach, and there is some real coldness to it, refuse. Refuse to let it approach. Refuse to let it touch you. Refuse to let it do anything and run. Flee from the cold voice that asks you to become evil and do not test your willpower. And there you go. That's the short story. It is rather short. I like this one. This one was actually based on a even shorter version of this story that I wrote like years ago. I'm talking like 2016 probably, like way back in the day, maybe even sooner than that. It was very, 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 very short. Like it was like one paragraph or like two paragraphs or something like that. And then I decided to rewrite it basically, and that's what this is. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. It is it's a little bit dark, but I hope you guys can enjoy it regardless. So if you did, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts on it was. I would definitely love to hear that and get some feedback on it or whatever else like that. Maybe even if you had any questions, maybe I can answer them or something. And if you guys would love to see me read more short stories, I do have other short stories in a playlist. You can find that in the top right card, or you can see them at the end screen cards as well, or just go to my channel and find those. But regardless of what you do here, I would very much appreciate a like, a subscribe, a share, or any number of those wonderful things like that, because when you do wonderful things like that, not only do you get access to wonderful content such as this, but you also get to become wonderful yourself, and I think we all want that. So do those wonderful things, and until next time, stay wonderful.